institutions. Actually, in China, not only banks lend loans to the corporates, there are also other companies. For example, the trust companies, there are financial leasing companies, and also the asset management companies, therefore EMCs. They lend loans, but not directly they lend loans to other corporates. They lend loans through some kind of structure that's called shadow banking. Okay. There is no, this part. The banking system, it includes traditional banking and shadow banking. Traditional banking is just you lend loans only from the banks, banking loans. But shadow banking, it includes many kinds. The first kind is non-intermediated. You can lend loans. For example, if corporate A wants to lend a loan to corporate B, in China you cannot. Because, this is the law. So you can only lend from China, corporate A can lend money to corporate B only through in-trust loans. But in-trust loans, you have to go through a kind of bank as book entry bank. And this bank does not bear the credit risk. Corporate A, the lender, does bear all the credit risk. The bank only goes through a kind of approval access required by the CBRC, but it does not bear credit risk. And the second kind of non-intermediated lending is informal lending. Because there's no appropriate names for this kind of lending, so I just call it informal lending. Just people lend to each other or lend online. Actually, what I want to mention here is there's one kind which is called P2P, peer-to-peer lending. Peer-to-peer lending that people can lend to each other that you never know and just online. Lending Club in the US, I think, is the biggest peer-to-peer lending company. It just went public last December. And one of the two co-founders of Lending Club, he went to China 3 years ago to set up a platform which is also P2P lending. And it has been a great success in China for P2P lending. Actually, I was one of the helpers to kickstart the company. And that man, which his name is called So Hatai, he established a JV with China Art, with my company, to kickstart the process. And in China, there are some people who sell, there are more than 1,000 P2P companies, but there are some only 5 to 10 companies that are doing very well, including that Lending Club one, which is called Dianrong, or Sanyo Lending. And there's another one called Lufax, which is set up by China Ping An Insurance Group. And also there's some others that are doing P2P, they're doing very well. But as from banking perspective, they're informal. There is no intermediation. And there is a second kind, which is intermediated. These kinds are regulated by some kinds of department. And the first is trust loans. Trust loans is the kind of loans that are extended by trust company. You know, in China, the definition trust is quite different from the US, I think. For trust companies, it acts just like a bank. You take, you take funds from people, from investors, and you extend loans to other corporates or to other individuals. And in the past 5 years, trust has been increasing very fast. The part of the reason is because if you buy a trust product, the return on investment, that is interest rate, is much higher than the deposit of the benchmark rate. It almost 500 to 1,000 BP above that. It used to be much higher 3 or 4 years ago. Actually, we as individual investors used to buy a lot of the trust products. And the second kind is called micro lending and pawn shops and guarantee companies. These are companies that usually extend loans to very small business. Is called SME, small and medium-sized enterprises, and also to individuals. They also have collaterals but these kind of companies, when they extend loans, the interest rate used to be very high. But in China, there is a rule that you cannot be 4 times of the benchmark rate. So if the benchmark rate is 6%, you cannot be higher than 24%. So that's the city. And the third kind is loans from other financial institutions. These other financial institutions include financial leasing companies, financing leasing companies regulated by MOFCOM, and also there are also some other little institutions funded by the local governments. The other one is called Wealth Management Products, WMP. WMP actually is not a kind of a banking activity. It's only act as a sales channel for the kinds of products that come from trust loans, from micro-lending, or from banks, or from non-banks, or from financial leasing companies. So investors just buy these kind of products from the banks or from the other brokers. There are only 2 kinds of channels selling these kind of wealth management products. The first kind is bank. You have many local banks or branches sell these WMPs, and the other kind of broker is called securities broker. It is regulated by the CSRC, China Securities Regulatory Commission. So you can buy these kind of products from, and these kind of products used to be, the interest rate used to be between about 6% to 15%. Yeah, very much higher than in the US. And corporate bonds is sometimes it also viewed as kind of a shadow banking, but actually corporate bonds is highly regulated by the NDRC, and sometimes by the PBOC when you issue a short-term or medium-term paper. This page almost the same as the last page, but I show where the source of funds come and which one is the credit intermediation and who uses the fund and who are the regulators. Maybe I can, okay. So you can see that for the first kind, traditional commercial banks, banks take deposit from the household, from the companies, and extend loans to the household and to the corporations. And the regulators are CBRC and PBOC. And for the shadow banking activities, the first kind is non-intermediated. Individuals, they lend to each other through a bank, through a trust loans structure. Actually, the traditional banking and the shadow banking are highly interrelated. In most of the shadow banking activities, the traditional banks do involve in these products. They cooperate with the other in trust loans or brokers, asset management, or trust companies or sometimes informal loans, and they sell the wealth management products. These kinds of institutions are highly interrelated. Okay, this is one of the actual cases for financing. This case happened in 2014 in Shanghai. One of the U.S. funds, they bought a local hospital in Shanghai through this financing structure. You can see the bank in Shanghai Foreign Trade Zone, they can lend directly offshore to the fund in Hong Kong or in BVI, but this kind of loans can be in renminbi. Yeah, many companies, including my company, were issuing renminbi denominated bonds overseas, mostly in Hong Kong. So they have very many renminbi to lend out. So, and this bank also lends to the domestic, the local entity of that fund. So if you go to a bank in Shanghai, FTZ, they're called Foreign Trade Zone, Free Trade Zone, you can do this kind of deal, the financing deal. Both lend money, borrow money from offshore or just onshore. Yeah, this is a second real case to show how the shadow banking work. You can see that in this structure, bank work closely with EMC, the asset management company, and also trust company. If a company, if the company has a loan and the company wants to extend, but there is no a quota in the bank, and the bank work closely with the EMC or trust company. The EMC as a managed company can buy the loan from the bank and change the title, change the lien of the collateral, and also cooperate with the trust company to extend another loan to this company. And also EMC and trust company can work together to share the loan, to share the collateral and to also share the loan. So this is a very typical kind of, we call it shadow banking. Okay, thank you. If you have any questions, you're free to have them.